All right. So this is module four, or sorry, module four, chapter four in our continuation of VMware. Uh, I know that for a lot of students, this is the time when they'll start ramping up submitting assignments because I used to be that kind of a student too. So I am well aware that students who are behind are going to start catching up now. And I will do my best to stay on top of the grading and so that you know where your grade stands. Please remember that I accept any and all assignments until we hit that due until date. Once that is struck, I will no longer accept anything. So please schedule yourself accordingly. I'm pretty sure in this course you will have time to catch up in case you have fallen behind. But if not, please be sure to submit everything before the due until date. You won't get punished if you submit up until that deadline, because I understand that life happens, and and this has been a crazy year. So I'm not gonna punish you for that. With that, let's go ahead and run through this chapter. We have our four lessons today, starting with content libraries, all items that we've talked about, but diving a little further. So your content libraries are awesome to share things that you've made, like virtual machines or appliances, or even sharing ISO files across vCenters. It's an effective way to share all this stuff without using sneakernet, really. They're simple to manage, and sharing is pretty straightforward. The content libraries can be consistent across multiple sites, so you don't have to do backups and transfers yourself. They synchronize with each other and can use the vCenters and vCloud directors in order to do that. So you really, once you upload into a content library, it's up there for all your other vCenters to access. You can have different kinds of libraries: local, published, optimized, published, and subscribed. So anything that's local or published can be added, modified, or deleted by any admin. Subscribed can't be changed by a user who subscribed to it. Kind of like you can read, but you can't write. A subscribed content library can't be published. An optimized published is residing on a remote vCenter server and gives you access. As we've seen before, it is pretty straightforward to share or to create and share a content library. And then you would start the wizard. You would select the type of content library that you're creating. Could be a local one, could be subscribed. And then you would start populating it once you've created it. And that could be importing OVF files, importing from a URL from another content library, or adding templates or VApps or whatever you want to add. Create new VMs and uh, deploy from a template that's in your library. So you don't have to provide any more info other than that, and it'll do the download and configurations for you. We can also mount a bunch of ISO files and have them be copied down. Of course, those who have the rights to update can update content library items, and you can publish them for external use. Through a subscription, you can download all the library content. And one of the great things is it doesn't download the actual items; it downloads the metadata, so that when you need them, you can get it then instead of just already populating. So your interactions with your subscribers can be simply an update, or can be any security updates for templates, or any files that need to take action on other servers. Synchronizing can happen in the background at a scheduled time, or just automatically, so that all your subscribers are uh, all completely updated without them having to do anything. Your maximums. A vCenter can have a total of 1,000 libraries. It can sync up to 16 at once. A item in the library could be up to a terabyte. And you have a lab on creating a content library. Lesson number 2 will be the host profiles. Another way to make your life easier, especially when we're talking at a data center level, because these host profiles can be used to deploy on new systems or to update systems without having to touch every physical ESXi server. Not a problem if you have one or two, but a problem if you're looking at 20, 30 hosts in one data center and you need to update their settings. It's just much easier to say, here's the profile, go ahead and update. Kind of like a Windows group policy. Now your reference host will have everything that you want, the right storage, networking, all the settings that you want, and then you can deploy out to your cluster. Once you have these in place, these host profiles in place, any new host that comes in will be checked for compliance, and it'll let you know, hey, these things aren't compliant with the profile that was made. Those that show up, you'll need to put into maintenance mode and do whatever is necessary, or have it do it for you. You can customize a host and create a profile off of that host. You can also do this with AutoDeploy. And within the navigator, we can copy out any host profiles that we want. So for example, let's say we have our golden image and we want to save that. We can save it out as a CSV file. You can use that same file that you exported, import to another vCenter, and then apply it out to the hosts within that data center. So it's great as a little backup. Your image builder is lesson number 3. So speaking of hosts, bringing on new hosts can always be a drag, because we have to install, we have to do setups and maintenance and whatnot, but we can automate a lot of this. A ESXi image contains these 4 main items: the hypervisor, the core hypervisor, the plugin components, the drivers, and the CIM providers. A VIB, or a vSphere installation bundle, has a number of things that may not be in the default install, like drivers or other plugins. So, your standard installer has base things that will work everywhere, but maybe you have a certain storage card that it doesn't read. Well, you'll need to install that driver by using a VIB. The image builder will help you create and manage these image profiles. You can also use this to build a network boot images so that you can deploy ESXi over the network to these systems without having to touch them. There are a couple of components to this image builder, but it's definitely worth it, especially if you have a very large data center. You'll need the VIB, you'll need an image profile, and a software depot to store. So here's kind of a walkthrough of building an ESXi image. Obviously, you'll start from the web client. And then you can add or import a software depot where the image will be stored. You can clone a modified image profile. And then you can generate that image as an ISO or a zip. Speaking of AutoDeploy, the last lesson, this is where we can take those images created earlier and have the physical hosts boot off the network and receive the OS and configurations and boot from the network. You can deploy as stateless, stateless caching, or stateful install. The stateless mode uses no local storage. Every stateless ESXi boot is like a first boot, and you'll see that in a moment. And the host configuration is abstracted into a host profile. The stateless mode has the advantage of easy replacement, removal, or addition of failed hardware, and improved ease in scaling hardware deployment because it's not installed into the physical hardware. It's just booting off the network until it's turned off. The stateless caching will save the image to a local disk, but the host continues to perform stateless reboots. So the image on the local can be used as a backup if in case it can't get the Pixie boot. And the stateless caching can be configured to overwrite or preserve any existing data stores. Your stateful installation will have the host initially boot, AutoDeploy, and then any subsequent reboots will use the local disk. If you go about this way, know that after it's installed on the local disk, it won't boot from the network. So you'll have to find another way to update and patch the host. So if you want to use the stateless method, you essentially want to stay using the stateless method and not have stateful. So all the host configuration and state info will be stored and managed by the vCenter server. And here you have all the information that would be stored. Your AutoDeploy architecture may look a little crazy, but it's not that different from any other network boot, where you have to have an image, you have to have a server to start the Pixie boot, and all the files necessary to run it. The rule engine basics, which you see here in the middle, is a rule engine that determines which profile will be used for what host. It'll map those profiles to the host and attribute any settings like a specific IP or MAC address. The rule engine, of course, has rules and rule sets. In order to use this method, this AutoDeploy method, you need to have the host, number one, be able to boot over the network. And you need to have the DHCP server point to a TFTP server to download the PXE files. So this is definitely not something that is only within the VMware ecosystem. You're going to have to use your networking ecosystem to help out with this. So here's the initial boot for an auto-deployed host. The host turns on, calls out to get a DHCP address, sees that, oh, we have a TFTP. Cool, so it's time to go get that image. Once that image is there, then it'll contact the AutoDeploy service. That'll contact the rules engine, grab the proper profile, the image profile and host profile, and what cluster this host will go into. That image is then put onto that host and applied. And then it is placed on the appropriate cluster as defined. A subsequent stateless boot would go through a similar process of starting up, booting PXE, or booting over the network, getting its IP address, going and getting the general PXE boot, and then contacting the vSphere. And now that it's already booted once, it already knows what host profile will go to it, sends it on its way, and put in the cluster. Here's a question for you. The stateful install and stateless caching modes help minimize the dependency on vCenter server and the PXE boot environment. And the answer is true. You can run custom scripts on stateless hosts as long as they are TGZ, no more than 10 megabytes, written in Python or BusyBox. It is possible to boot multiple hosts over the network, but if you're getting a little too big, you might want to use proxy servers to cache a lot of this information. That way, the one vCenter doesn't get overwhelmed with too many requests. You could definitely load balance with proxies. Like I said, you can use those host profiles to configure and auto-deploy your stateless caching. You'll create them with caching configured, and the host will run stateless in normal operation. A stateless caching host, after getting its image, will boot locally. The reboots can be stateless when PXE and AutoDeploy are available. A stateful can be set up in a similar way. You go and say this will be a stateful install. After it gets its image from PXE, then that host will continue to boot from its local disk in a stateful installation. And it won't need PXE boot anymore. Again, before you do auto-deploy, you need to make sure that your network can handle it and has the proper settings in order for this to work. So you'll need to go on your DHCP server, whichever it is, if it's pfSense, Windows, whatever the case may be, and set up the TFTP boot and boot file name. Then you can start the auto-deploy service. Then you'll prepare the TFTP by creating the file necessary. Then you'll create the deployment rules. And then you'll need to activate. Just because you create the rule doesn't mean it's activated. You'll need to activate. and then it'll be ready to go. Now here's a couple things to keep in mind. If you change a rule set, any unprovisioned hosts will use the new rule set automatically. All other hosts, you'll need to do a compliance. vCenter will reside in your management cluster. These should not be managed by AutoDeploy. vCenter, wherever vCenter lies, should not be affected by this. And vCenter does not need to be available for reboots of stateless caching or stateful installs. It is possible to use AutoDeploy with the update manager. And then you'll have a lab to work on this. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in Discord. But I hope that this was informative for you. And we shall see you soon.